At 5:17 in the morning, Tessa Monroe turned down the chance to see her daughter. The chaplain thought he had misheard her. "You have 7 hours," he said. "Family can come in at 6. Tessa sat on the edge of the narrow bench inside the death row interview room, ankles chained, wrists secured in front of her.
"I know your daughter is already here." That made Tessa look up.
For 12 years she had imagined 100 versions of her final morning. In none of them had she expected Maya to arrive early. The chaplain lowered his voice. She drove through the night. Tessa's fingers closed around the chain between the cuffs. "Tell her I need a little time." The chaplain stared at her. "Tessa, I'll see her. When? After I talk to someone else?" He glanced toward the corrections officer standing by the door.
"Who?" Tessa answered without hesitation, "Lieutenant Nolan Creed."
The officer by the door looked at her. The chaplain frowned.
"State police, county police. Creed retired last year."
"I know. You know where he lives?" "No." The chaplain waited. Tessa's face stayed still. "You expect the prison to find a retired cop before noon?" "I expect somebody to try. Why him?" Tessa leaned back against the wall. The room was too cold. It had always been too cold in that wing. She had stopped complaining years ago, because 12 years ago Nolan Creed stood 6 feet away from the truth. The chaplain said nothing. Tessa looked toward the observation window. And he chose not to touch it. The corrections officer shifted his weight. The chaplain pulled out the chair across from her and sat. "This about your case?" "Everything today is about my case." "Tessa, your appeals are done, I know. The governor denied clemency last night."
"I know, there's no hearing scheduled, I know."
"Then what do you expect Creed to do?" For the first time, Tessa smiled. It was small, tired, not hopeful, "I don't know yet." That answer bothered the chaplain more than anything else she had said. He studied her for a few seconds, then he stood. "I'll speak to the warden." "Thank you." At the door he stopped. "Do you want me to tell your daughter who you asked for?" "No, why not?" Tessa looked down at her cuffed hands.
"Because Maya has spent 12 years believing Nolan Creed was the man who put me here."
The chaplain waited. Tessa raised her eyes. "I'm not sure that's true anymore." The door closed. For the first time that morning, Tessa was alone. She turned her left wrist slightly and looked at the faded scar near her thumb. 12 years earlier, it had been fresh. Blood on her sleeve. Glass in her palm. A police officer shouting for her to get on the ground. A dying man 30 yards away. And Nolan Creed standing beside a patrol car, looking at something on a screen before another detective ripped the device out of his hands. Tessa had spent years thinking about that moment. The prosecutor had told the jury she remembered it wrong. The defense attorney called it trauma. Creed testified that nothing important had been on the screen. The jury believed him. They had also believed the gun in Tessa's trunk belonged to her. They believed the blood on her coat put her close enough to kill a man. They believed a witness who said she had threatened the victim 3 days earlier. And most of all, they believed the statement Tessa gave after 14 hours in an interrogation room. Not a confession, not exactly, but enough broken sentences, exhausted guesses, and repeated phrases to let the prosecution build one. She had gone to sleep in a chair at a county precinct. She woke up accused of murder. By the end of the week, television stations were calling her the woman who killed Councilman Raymond Holt. By the end of the year, a jury had agreed. 12 years later, the state was preparing to kill her for it. At 5:31, Warden Briggs received the request. He read the name twice. "Nolan Creed?" The chaplain nodded. Briggs leaned back in his chair. "You sure?" She was specific. Creed testified at trial. "I know," he was one of the responding officers. "I know. Did she say why?" "Not clearly." Briggs picked up the phone, then stopped. "You think this is some kind of final confrontation?"
"I think she's been on death row 12 years and has never requested contact with a police officer before."
Briggs looked at the clock. 7 hours was not much time. But it was too much time to ignore something this strange. He opened the old visitor contact file. Creed's current number was not listed. The county pension office had one. At 5:39, Nolan Creed's phone rang on a nightstand beside a half-empty glass of water. He was awake before the second ring. Retirement had not cured him of that. He reached for the phone, saw an unfamiliar state number, and nearly let it go to voicemail. Then he answered. "Creed. This is Warden Briggs at East Ridge Correctional." Nolan sat up. The room around him changed before the warden said another word. Not physically, nothing moved, but somewhere inside Nolan, a door he had kept shut for 12 years came open.
I'm calling about Tessa Monroe. Nolan's eyes closed.
Briggs continued. She requested to see you. Nolan said nothing. She's scheduled for execution at 12:30. I know. The answer came too fast. Briggs noticed. You've been following the case? Nolan looked toward the dresser across from his bed. The bottom drawer was locked. No. Then how did you know the time? Nolan rubbed his face. It was in the paper. There had been no execution time in the morning paper. Only the date. Briggs did not challenge him. Tessa asked for you by name. Did she say what she wants? No. Nolan stood. His knee hurt when he put weight on it. It always did in cold weather. Is this recorded? The visit would be. Another pause. That answer mattered. Briggs heard Nolan exhale. I'll come. You understand you're not obligated. I said I'll come. Nolan ended the call. For almost a minute he stood beside the bed holding the phone. Then he crossed the room. He knelt in front of the dresser. Unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was an old county police evidence envelope.
Not official anymore. It had been voided years ago.
A red stamp crossed the front, duplicate, no evidentiary value. Nolan lifted it out. The envelope was light. It contained only 3 things. A handwritten parking receipt, a photocopy of a dispatch log, and a small black plastic key fob from a car that had been crushed 11 years earlier. He had told himself many times that none of it proved Tessa Monroe was innocent. That was true. He had also told himself it meant nothing. That was not. Nolan put the envelope inside his jacket. Then he stood in the dark bedroom and looked at his reflection in the mirror. You should have burned it, he said.
He had no idea whether he meant 12 years ago or now.
At 6:03, Tessa finally agreed to see her daughter. Maya Monroe entered the visitation room without a coat, even though it was 29 degrees outside. She was 24 now when Tessa was arrested. She had been 12. Prison had stolen the years between those 2 versions of her daughter and returned only photographs. School pictures, a graduation photo, a college acceptance letter, a picture from a hospital where Maya now worked as a respiratory therapist. Tessa stood when she saw her. The chain at her ankles stopped her after 1 step. Maya stopped too. For a second, neither spoke. Then Maya crossed the room and wrapped both arms around her mother. The guard looked away. Tessa closed her eyes. She had promised herself she would not cry. She didn't, but her hand shook when she touched the back of Maya's head. You cut your hair. Maya laughed once against her shoulder. 6 months ago. You didn't send me a picture. I did. I never got it, that tracks, Tessa smiled. Maya looked at the restraints. Her mouth tightened. Tessa put both hands under the table. Don't what? Spend our time staring at those. Maya looked at her mother. You asked to see a cop before me. Tessa froze. The chaplain told you? Then how do you know? I heard 2 guards talking outside. Tessa looked toward the door. Maya leaned forward.
Nolan Creed, yes.
The man who testified against you? Yes. Why, I need to hear him answer something. You have 7 hours. That's not funny. I wasn't joking. Maya stood. The guard looked over. Tessa kept her voice low. Sit down. Maya.
No, Mum. I drove 9 hours because every lawyer we called said nothing was left.
The governor said no. The court said no. And now I get here and you're spending your last morning trying to talk to the cop who helped convict you? Tessa watched her daughter. The anger was real. So was the fear under it. I spent 12 years blaming Creed. Good. I'm not sure I was blaming the right man. Maya stared at her. What does that mean? It means I remember something. You've remembered things before. The sentence hit harder than Maya intended. She knew it immediately. Tessa looked away. During the first 5 years after conviction, she had sent lawyers dozens of details. A dark sedan she thought she had seen near the loading dock. A man wearing a green jacket. A sound like a truck door slamming. A streetlight that was out. Most went nowhere. Some were wrong. Memory inside trauma had edges that moved. Tessa knew that better than anyone. Maya sat again. I'm sorry, no, you're right, I didn't mean... You were right. Tessa leaned forward. That's why I didn't say anything about Creed until now. Say anything about what? Tessa looked toward the camera in the corner. Then back at Maya. When the police pulled me out of the car that night, Creed was holding a handheld traffic reader. Maya frowned. A what? Old patrol equipment. It could pull transponder data from city parking gates. That was evidence. I don't know. What did you see? Nothing, Maya blinked. Then why does it matter? Because Creed looked at it. Tessa's voice dropped, and another detective told him to shut it down. Who? Tessa hesitated. Detective Brent Shaw. Maya knew the name. Everyone who followed the case did. Shaw had led the homicide investigation. He had retired 5 years later. He died of a stroke 2 years after that. You think Shaw hid something? I think Creed saw something Shaw didn't want logged. Why wait until today? Because until last week I thought Creed was part of it. Maya leaned closer. What happened last week? Tessa glanced at the door again. A letter. Maya's eyes widened. What letter? From Creed. The room went still. He wrote you? Not directly. How? A public defender brought me a copy of a document from an old civil case. What document? Tessa's voice became quieter. Creed gave a deposition 3 years ago in a lawsuit against the county. About you? No. Then why does it matter? Because he was asked whether Detective Shaw ever ordered officers to leave information out of preliminary reports. Maya stopped moving. What did Creed say? Tessa held her daughter's eyes. He said yes. The guard by the wall shifted. Maya whispered, "Oh my God." That doesn't clear me, but it matters. Yes. What else? He was asked whether he ever obeyed one of those orders. And Tessa looked down at her hands. He refused to answer. Maya sat back. For the first time since entering the room, she had nothing to say. Tessa continued. My attorney filed an emergency request to get the full deposition. What happened? Denied yesterday. Why? Because it was unrelated litigation, and Creed's answer didn't prove anything about my case. Maya's eyes filled. So this is it? No. You're hoping he confesses?
No, then what? I want to know what was on that reader.
Maya wiped her face with both hands. And if he won't tell you?
Tessa looked toward the clock. Then I'll know what kind of man he decided to be.
At 7:12, Nolan Creed was 40 miles from the prison when he pulled into a gas station. He did not need gas. He needed to stop driving. His hands had begun gripping the steering wheel too hard. He parked beside an ice machine and sat. The old evidence envelope rested on the passenger seat. He stared at it. 12 years ago, Nolan had 29. 3 years into the job, newly married, 1 child. Another on the way. Detective Brent Shaw had been the kind of cop rookies measured themselves against. 22 years in homicide. Medals, commendations. A photograph with the governor. When Shaw spoke, patrol officers stopped asking questions. On the night Raymond Holt died, Nolan arrived before homicide. He found Tessa Monroe in a grey sedan near the west parking exit. She had blood on one sleeve, a cut palm, no weapon. No idea who had been shot. Nolan remembered asking her why she was there. She said she had stopped because she saw a man lying beside a service road. She had tried to help him. Then headlights came around the corner and she panicked. Nolan did not believe her. That was the first mistake. The dead man was a city councilman. Tessa's prints were later found on his jacket. His blood was on her sleeve. A handgun was found in her trunk. By midnight, Nolan thought the case was obvious. Then a parking enforcement technician handed him the traffic reader. Her car didn't come through gate 4, the technician said. Nolan remembered looking down at the device. Tessa's parking tag had exited the municipal garage 9 blocks away at 9:18 p. Holt's estimated time of death was between 9:20 and 9:35. The drive between the garage and the service road usually took 12 minutes. Maybe 8 without traffic. It did not prove innocence. But it made the timeline tight, very tight. Nolan showed Shaw. Shaw stared at the screen, then at Tessa, then back at Nolan. Reader's been glitching all month. Nolan said, we should log it. Shaw answered, we should verify it. He took the reader. Nolan never saw it again. 2 days later, the official parking data showed no usable record for Tessa's vehicle. Nolan asked once. Shaw told him the device had malfunctioned. Nolan asked again. Shaw told him to stop trying to turn a clean murder case into a science project. At trial, Nolan testified that he had seen nothing on the traffic reader that changed his assessment of the scene. Technically, he told himself, that was true. It had not changed his assessment. He still believed Tessa was guilty. That excuse worked for years. Until Shaw's timeline changed. Until a technician retired and told Nolan the reader had never been reported broken. Until Nolan discovered the parking receipt. Until the gun found in Tessa's trunk was quietly linked to a batch of weapons from an evidence seizure handled by Shaw's unit. By then the appeals were already moving. Nolan said nothing. Not because he knew Tessa was innocent, because speaking would destroy his career and still might not save her. That was what he told himself. He picked up the evidence envelope. The small black key fob inside had once opened gate 4 of the municipal garage. Tessa's account number was printed on the old receipt beside it. The time was clear, 9:18 p.m. Nolan looked at the dashboard clock. 7:19, he had 5 hours and 11 minutes before the execution. For 12 years, he had managed to convince himself that doubt and innocence were not the same thing. Now a woman waiting to die had asked to see him. He started the car. At 8:02, the prison received a call from the governor's legal office. Warden Briggs stood at his desk listening. No, nothing has changed. He looked through the glass wall toward the corridor.
Yes, she requested a retired officer. Pause.
No, sir, I don't know why. Another pause, I understand. He hung up. The chaplain stood near the door. What? Governor's office heard about the request. How? Somebody talks. Somebody always talks. What do they want? To know if there's any new legal claim. Is there? Briggs looked toward the death row wing. I don't know. At 8:11, Maya was escorted back to the family waiting area. Before she left, she grabbed her mother's hand. Promise me something. Tessa looked at her. What? If Creed brings you anything, you don't let it stay in this building. Tessa almost smiled. You've been watching too much television. I'm serious, so am I, Mom. Tessa squeezed her finger. If he brings something real, I'll make sure your lawyers know before he leaves. Maya nodded, then stopped. Do you think he's coming? Tessa looked at the clock. Yes. How do you know?
Because if he wanted me dead without hearing what I know, he would have ignored the call.
Maya stared at her. You sound sure. I'm not. That surprised her. Tessa continued. I spent 12 years being sure about him. She looked toward the door. I'm done being sure before I have facts. At 8:47, Nolan Creed arrived at East Ridge Correctional. The intake officer took his wallet, his keys, his phone. Then the officer pointed at the envelope under Nolan's arm. What's that? Nolan looked down. Personal documents. Can't take them inside without inspection. Nolan hesitated. The officer held out his hand. Sir? Nolan gave him the envelope. The officer opened the flap. He removed the parking receipt first. Then the dispatch photocopy. Then the black key fob. What is this? Nolan reached across the counter and took the receipt back. The officer's posture changed. Sir, you need to leave that there. Nolan looked toward the security camera, then at the officer. I need the warden. You can request him after processing. No, excuse. I need Warden Briggs before you copy, scan, photograph, or enter any description of these items into your intake system. The officer stared at him. Why? Nolan's mouth tightened. Because one police record already disappeared once. The officer stopped. Nolan placed the receipt back on the counter. And I'm not helping it happen twice. 10 minutes later, Warden Briggs entered the lobby. Nolan was still standing beside the counter. Briggs looked at the envelope. Then at him. You brought evidence? Nolan answered carefully. I brought something that should have been evidence. Briggs's face changed. Does this concern Monroe's conviction? Yes. Does her attorney know you have it? No. The governor? No. District attorney? No. Anyone? Nolan looked through the reinforced glass toward the locked interior doors. Tessa knows enough to ask the right question. That's not what I asked. No, Briggs exhaled. You understand what you're saying? Yes.
You understand the execution is in less than 4 hours?
Nolan looked at the wall clock. 3 hours and 29 minutes. Briggs picked up the phone. Nolan stopped him. Before you call anyone, I need to see her.
Nolan's eyes narrowed. You called me here.
For a visit, not to conduct some private evidence exchange. I'm not exchanging anything. Then tell me what you brought. Nolan looked at the observation camera, then back at Briggs. I'll tell her first. You don't set the rules in my prison. No, Nolan's voice dropped. But 12 years ago I let another cop set the rules in my report. Briggs said nothing. Nolan held up the envelope. I'm not doing that again. At 9:03, Tessa heard the locks cycle outside the interview room. She had been sitting alone for 20 minutes. The door opened. Warden Briggs entered first. Behind him stood Nolan Creed. He looked older than Tessa remembered, grey at the temples. Heavier, no uniform, no badge. For 1 second, Tessa saw the 29-year-old officer from the parking lot. Then he was gone. Nolan stepped inside. His eyes went to the restraints. Then to Tessa's face. Neither spoke. Briggs placed a chair across the table. "This visit is being recorded." Tessa looked at Nolan. "I assumed it would be." Nolan sat. Briggs remained by the door. Tessa glanced at him. "I asked to see one cop, former cop," Nolan said. Tessa looked back at him. "Does that make it easier?" "No good." Nolan rested both hands on the table. Tessa noticed they were empty. "Where is it?" He did not pretend not to understand. "With the warden." "What did you bring?" Nolan looked toward the camera. Tessa followed his eyes, then back to him. "You were afraid of cameras 12 years ago too?" "I sure was." Nolan's jaw tightened. That was enough. Tessa leaned forward. "So I remembered correctly." "You remembered a lot of things. Don't do that." "Do what? Talk like the prosecutor." Nolan looked down. Tessa waited. He raised his eyes again.
You asked me here because of the traffic reader.
"Yeah, who told you about my deposition? Does it matter?" "Yes. Why? Because somebody was digging before today." Tessa studied him. "You sound worried." "I am. About me?" "About yourself?" Nolan did not answer. Tessa sat back. "There you are. What does that mean?" "That's the face I remember." Nolan's expression hardened. "You saw me for maybe 20 minutes that night." "I saw you longer than anyone else did." "That doesn't make sense." "It will." Nolan glanced toward Briggs, then back to her. "Tessa, I didn't come here to argue about memory." "Then tell me what was on the reader." Nolan was silent. Tessa's voice stayed calm. "You testified there was nothing important." "Was that true?" Nolan looked at his hands.
No, Warden Briggs straightened near the door. Tessa didn't move.
"Say it again." Nolan lifted his eyes. "No." Tessa's mouth opened slightly.
12 years. Every hearing, every denied appeal.
Every night she had replayed that parking lot. The truth, when it finally arrived, was smaller than she expected.
One word. No, Nolan continued. Your parking transponder registered an exit from the Monroe Street garage at 9:18.
Tessa stared at him. The prosecution said there was no record. Briggs stepped closer. Nolan kept talking. "The device showed it that night. What happened to it?" "Shaw took the reader. And it never appeared in evidence." Tessa's breathing changed, barely. But Nolan saw it. "What did you do?" "I asked about it twice." "Then what?" Nolan said nothing. Tessa leaned forward. "Then what?" "I stopped asking." The chain between her cuffs scraped against the table. Briggs looked at her hands. Tessa didn't raise her voice. "You watched them sentence me to death. I believed you were guilty. You had evidence that didn't fit. I had a timestamp. You had doubt, and you buried it. No." Tessa's eyes hardened. "You don't get to choose that word." "I didn't destroy anything." "You lied." "I told the jury the reader didn't change my assessment." "Because your assessment mattered more than the data?" Nolan said nothing. Tessa nodded once. "That's what I thought." Nolan leaned forward. "But that's not why I came." Tessa stared at him. "What else?" Nolan looked toward Briggs. "Bring the envelope." Briggs hesitated, then stepped outside. Tessa watched Nolan. "What else did you keep? A receipt?" "For what?" "The garage. You've had it 12 years?" 11. Where did you get it?" "Maintenance archive."
When? A year after your trial?
Tessa's eyes narrowed. "You found proof after I was convicted? Proof you left the garage at 9:18. "And said nothing?" Nolan's voice changed. "I said it didn't prove who killed Holt." "No." Tessa leaned closer. "You said nothing." Nolan looked away. That hurt more than anger would have. Briggs returned with the evidence envelope sealed inside a clear prison property bag. He placed it on the table. Tessa stared at it. Nolan did not touch it. "What's the black thing?" she asked. Nolan looked at the bag. "Your old parking fob." Tessa's face changed. "I never got that back."
I know. Police said it wasn't recovered. I know.
"Where did you find it?" "Nolan Shaw's desk." The room went still. Tessa looked at Briggs, then at Nolan. "When after he retired? Why was my property in his desk?" "I don't know. Don't lie to me today. I'm not." "Then guess." Nolan looked directly at her. I think he kept it because it could prove the reader was tracking the right vehicle. Tessa stopped breathing for a second. Briggs reached for the phone clipped at his belt. Nolan spoke quickly. That still doesn't clear her. Briggs looked at him. No, but there's something else. Tessa's eyes locked on his. What? Nolan pointed toward the photocopied dispatch log inside the bag. I found that 2 months ago. Where? County Archive. What does it say? Nolan did not answer immediately. Tessa's voice. Nolan. He looked at the clock on the wall. 3 hours and 8 minutes. Then back at her. Your car wasn't the first vehicle reported leaving the service road that night. Tessa went still. Nolan continued. There was another car. Briggs stopped reaching for his phone. Tessa whispered, whose? Nolan looked toward the camera, then at the prison door. Then back at the woman scheduled to die before lunch. The plate belonged to Detective Brent Shaw. Tessa didn't move. For 12 years, Detective Brent Shaw had been a dead end. He was dead now. His personnel file had been closed. His testimony had never put him near the murder scene. And yet the dispatch log inside a clear plastic bag showed that his car had been there. What time? Tessa asked. Nolan Creed looked at the photocopy. 9:26 p.m. Tessa's parking receipt showed 9:18. The state's trial theory had placed her at the service road before 9:25. She stared at Nolan. How far was the garage? Depending on traffic, 9 to 12 minutes. So even if I drove straight there, you'd be cutting the state's timeline down to almost nothing. Almost. Nolan's answer came fast. It still doesn't make it impossible. Tessa's mouth tightened, even now, even with less than 3 hours left. He was still speaking like a cop afraid of overstating evidence. Warden Briggs picked up the property bag. Why wasn't Shaw's vehicle in the trial record? Nolan looked at him, because that log wasn't in the homicide file. Where was it? Dispatch archive. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense if somebody classified the call wrong. Tessa leaned forward. What call? Nolan looked at her. The report that created the entry. What report? A city maintenance worker saw a dark sedan leaving the service road and called it in. Tessa waited. The plate was partially red. Nolan continued. Dispatch matched it to Shaw's county vehicle, and nobody followed up. Not in the murder file. Why? The entry was coded as officer movement. Tessa stared at him. Meaning? Meaning once the plate came back to a police vehicle, Dispatch treated it like Shaw had a legitimate reason to be there. Briggs frowned. Did he? Nolan shook his head. Not according to any assignment record I found. The warden reached for his phone. This time Nolan did not stop him. Briggs called the prison legal office first, then the state attorney general's emergency line, then the governor's legal counsel. Nobody promised anything. That frightened Tessa more than if they had dismissed it. Everyone wanted copies. Everyone wanted timestamps. Everyone wanted to know where the originals had come from. And every question burned minutes. At 9:22, Briggs escorted Nolan out of the interview room. Tessa stood. Where are you taking him? Nowhere. I need him separated while counsel reviews this. I'm not finished. You may not get another visit. Tessa looked at Nolan. He was already at the door. Nolan, he stopped. You said there was something else. He turned halfway. Briggs looked at him. Nolan's face changed. Later, Tessa's cuffs hit the tabletop. No. Briggs stepped between them. Tessa, she ignored him. What else? Nolan stared at her. Then at the camera. Then at the warden. I need to confirm something first. You had 12 years, Tessa. You had 12 years to confirm things. The words landed hard enough that Nolan looked away. Briggs opened the door. Tessa raised her voice for the first time. What else did Shaw make disappear? Nolan stopped in the doorway. His hand closed around the frame. For a second, Tessa thought he might answer. Instead, he said, not sure. Then he walked out. That was worse. At 9:34, Maya was sitting in the family waiting room when a prison attorney entered. She stood at once. What happened? The attorney closed the door. New material was produced. What kind? Potentially exculpatory. Maya stared at him. That means she's not getting executed as... I didn't say that. You just said exculpatory. I said potentially. Then stop it. Who can? A court. Call one.
We are. Maya stepped closer. My mother has less than 3 hours.
I know, you don't. The attorney said nothing.
Maya's hands were shaking now. She spent 12 years hearing that every piece of new evidence was too small, too late, or not enough.
You found a police car at the murder scene that nobody told the jury about.
We found a copied dispatch record, then verify it. That's what they're doing. And while they verify it, what happens to the execution clock? He hesitated. That was the answer. Maya took out her phone.
No, the attorney frowned. What are you doing, calling her lawyer?
They're already involved. Then I'm calling everyone else. Maya. She looked at him. If the state needs 3 hours to decide whether hidden police records matter, they don't get to use those same 3 hours to kill my mother. At 9:41, Nolan Creed sat alone in a secure conference room. He had no phone, no wallet, no envelope, nothing to do except wait. That was when retirement stopped protecting him. For years, Nolan had told himself there were levels of guilt. Shaw had built the case. Shaw had controlled the evidence. Shaw had pushed the timeline. Nolan had only been 29.
Only patrol, only a witness to pieces, only a friend.
Only uncertain. The word only had carried him through a marriage, a divorce, promotions, and finally retirement. Now there was no one in the room to repeat it to. He looked at the camera in the corner, then at the locked door. 12 years earlier, after Shaw took the traffic reader, Nolan had followed him into the mobile command unit. He remembered the smell of burnt coffee, the radio chatter. Shaw leaning over a folding table. You want to make detectives someday? Nolan had said yes, then learned the difference between evidence and noise.
Nolan pointed toward the reader. That timestamp is evidence.
Shaw smiled. No, it's a machine making a guess. It logged her tag. It logged a tag. It's tied to her account. Shaw's smile disappeared.
You think she didn't kill him?
Nolan hesitated. That had been the moment. Not when he testified. Not when he later found the receipt. That moment, he should have said, I don't know. Instead he said, I think she did. Shaw nodded, then stopped helping her lawyer. Nolan had. At 9:52, Briggs returned. He carried no paperwork. Nolan stood. Well, the original dispatch database still has the entry. Nolan closed his eyes. For 12 years, a part of him had hoped the photocopy was somehow wrong. Briggs continued. The plate match is there, then stop the execution. I don't have that authority. You have enough to delay. No, I have enough to request delay. That's the same thing. No, it isn't. Nolan stared at him. Briggs stepped closer. Her attorney is filing in state court now. The Attorney General's office is reviewing. The Governor's Council has been notified.
What are they saying?
That none of this identifies the killer. Nolan laughed once. There was nothing funny in it, of course. Briggs watched him. They also want to know why you waited 12 years. Nolan looked toward the table. Yeah, they're going to ask under oath. I know. Is there something else they're going to find? Nolan did not answer. Briggs's expression changed. Nolan's silence. What did you mean when you told Tessa? Not sure. Nolan stared at the wall. Briggs waited. Finally, Nolan said, I need to see the gun inventory.
What gun inventory? The murder weapon.
Briggs frowned. That evidence is county property, I know. You don't have access.
I know, then why are you asking me? Because the Attorney General does.
Briggs studied him. What are you looking for? Nolan's jaw moved. Evidence control number. At 10:08, Tessa's attorney arrived in the death row wing carrying a laptop and 2 legal pads. She was not allowed to run. She came as close as prison rules permitted. Tessa was brought into the legal visit room. Tell me. Her attorney opened the laptop. The dispatch entry is real. Tessa closed her eyes. Sure? County vehicle registered to his unit. And the garage record, original archive, is gone. Tessa opened her eyes. Gone? Routine retention?
Years ago, so the receipt is all we have. The receipt and Nolan's testimony that he saw the reader.
That's weak. It's stronger than what we had yesterday. Tessa leaned back. What about the execution? Still scheduled. Tessa stared at her. Her attorney did not soften it. We filed an emergency motion. Judge assigned.
When? I don't know. That means no. It means I don't know.
Tessa looked at the clock. 2 hours and 16 minutes. Where's Nolan? Being interviewed. By who? State. What did he tell them? Her attorney paused. Tessa, did he ever mention an evidence control number to you?
No, the attorney looked down at her notes. What?
Before they separated him, he asked the state to pull the chain of custody history on the gun. Tessa leaned forward. Why? They haven't told me. He knows something, obviously. No. Tessa shook her head. He knows something about the gun. The weapon had always been the hardest piece of evidence to explain. A .38 revolver found beneath a blanket in the trunk of Tessa's car. One bullet missing. Ballistics consistent with the shot that killed Raymond Holt. Tessa had never owned a gun. The prosecution produced a witness from a sporting goods store who said a woman resembling her had asked about revolvers months earlier. It was weak, but the gun was real. The jury did not need much more. Tessa's attorney turned the laptop around. I pulled the trial transcript. She pointed to a paragraph Tessa read. The arresting team had secured her vehicle at 10:04 p.m. The search warrant was signed after midnight. The gun was logged at 1:18 a.m. And what am I looking at? Who logged it? Tessa, read the line again. The evidence officer's name meant nothing to her. That's not Creed. No. Then why does he care about the control number? I don't know. Tessa stared at the screen, then something from 12 years ago came back. Not an image. A sound, a metal trunk shutting. She looked at her attorney. When they arrested me, did police search my car at Service Road? Not legally. Did anyone open the trunk? The official report says no. Tessa's breathing changed. What? I heard it. Heard what? My trunk. When? While I was in the back of the patrol car. Her attorney froze. You've never told me that. I thought I imagined it. Who was near the car? Tessa closed her eyes. Flashes. Blue lights. A patrol officer at the driver door. Shaw near the road. Creed walking past. Someone behind her car. I don't know. You need to try. Tessa's hand tightened around the edge of the table. I couldn't see. Did Creed go near it? I don't know. The attorney leaned back. Tessa, don't guess. I'm not. Good. Tessa opened her eyes. But somebody opened that trunk before the warrant. At 10:21, Nolan sat across from two state investigators. Neither was introduced by name. One placed a tablet on the table. We pulled the archived weapon history. Nolan looked at the screen. Control number? The investigator read it. Nolan's face drained. Briggs, standing behind them, noticed. What? Nolan said nothing. The investigator repeated the number. Nolan looked down. Where did the gun come from before Monroe's case? The investigator frowned. What do you mean? That control number isn't original. The second investigator leaned forward. Explain. Nolan rubbed both hands over his face. County evidence numbers used to begin with the year and division.
Yes, that one starts with 09.
The murder was in 14.
I know, the investigator tapped the screen. What happened in 2009?
Nolan looked up. A narcotic seizure. Silence. Whose? Shaw's unit. Briggs swore under his breath. The investigator scrolled. This gun was seized 5 years before the Holt murder. If it's the same number, it is. What was the disposition? Another scroll. Marked for destruction. When? 2011. Nolan laughed once. The investigator looked at him. What? It wasn't destroyed? How do you know? Nolan stared at the tablet. Because I carried that box. Nobody moved. The investigator's voice changed. What box? Nolan's eyes closed. There it was. The part he had spent 12 years refusing to name correctly. Evidence transfer. When? The night Tessa was arrested. Briggs stepped closer. You moved the murder weapon? I didn't know it was the murder weapon. The investigator's tone sharpened. Start at the beginning. Nolan looked toward the camera. I was at the scene. Shaw told me an old evidence box had been left in his unmarked car. Said he needed it returned to the station. What was inside? I didn't open it. Where did you put it? Nolan's jaw tightened. In the mobile command truck. Then Shaw took it. You saw him take it? Yes. And later a gun from that same control number appears in Tessa Monroe's trunk. Yes. The investigator stared at him. You never reported this? No. Why? Because I didn't connect it that night. When did you connect it? Nolan looked down. 3 years later. Briggs stepped back as if Nolan had pushed him. 3 years? Nolan nodded. I was reviewing old evidence for another case. I saw the control number, and you stayed silent. Yes. Why? Nolan's voice became rough, because by then she was on death row. Shaw was decorated, and I had already testified. The investigator stared at him. That explains fear. Nolan looked up. It doesn't excuse it, no. The investigator leaned closer. It also doesn't answer the bigger question. Nolan knew what was coming. Who put the gun in her trunk? I don't know. You moved the box.
Yes, you were near her vehicle. Yes, you testified for the state.
Yes.
And now, 12 years later, hours before execution, you suddenly arrive with missing evidence?
Nolan's face hardened. I came because she asked for me. That isn't an answer, it's the truth. The investigator pushed the tablet toward him. Then give us something better. Nolan looked at the screen. He had one thing, something he had never told anyone. Something even Tessa did not remember. The investigator waited. Nolan spoke at 9:51 that night. Shaw sent me away from the scene. For what? To check a reported witness 2 blocks south.
Was there one? No. How long were you gone?
11 minutes.
What happened while you were gone?
I don't know.
Then why does it matter?
Nolan looked at him. Because before I left, Tessa's trunk was closed. He paused. When I came back, it wasn't. At 10:39, Tessa's attorney received the first verbal summary. Her face changed while she listened. Tessa watched from across the table.
What? The attorney held up one finger. She kept listening.
No. Send that to the court now.
Pause, yes.
Another pause. Sworn, she looked at Tessa. Get it sworn. She hung up. Tessa stood. What happened? Her attorney looked almost afraid to say it. The gun, what about it? It came from police evidence. Tessa's knees weakened. She grabbed the table. Her attorney moved toward her. Tessa raised one hand. No, sit down. The same revolver used in the Holt murder appears to trace back to a narcotic seizure 5 years earlier. Sure, his unit. Tessa stared at the wall. The room narrowed. The gun had never belonged to her. She knew that. Knowing was not the same as hearing proof. Her attorney continued.
Nolan carried an evidence box containing property from that old seizure on the night you were arrested.
Tessa turned. What? He says Shaw told him to move it. Where? To the command vehicle. Then Shaw took it. Tessa stepped back. Nolan carried the gun? He says he didn't know what was inside. He carried it, yes. And he said nothing for 12 years. Tessa sat. The chains at her ankles hit the chair leg. Her attorney crouched beside her. This is good for us. Tessa looked at her. Is it? Yes. He touched the evidence. That doesn't make him the killer. No. He withheld the traffic record.
Yes, he found my parking fob in Shaw's desk.
Yes. He found the old gun number 3 years later. Her attorney said nothing. Tessa looked at the clock. 1 hour and 48 minutes.
What if Nolan isn't here to save me?
Tessa.
What if he's here because he knows the rest is about to come out?
Her attorney stood. The state investigators are interviewing him now. Then they better ask the right question. What question? Tessa's voice dropped. Why Shaw trusted him enough to carry that box. At 10:47, a state judge agreed to hold an emergency conference. Not a hearing, not yet. A conference. The execution order remained active. The prison continued preparations. That was the part Maya could not understand. A guard came into the waiting room and told her there had been a legal development. Then another officer brought a tray of food for her mother. Maya stared at it. You're still preparing? The officer said nothing.
You know they found evidence, ma'am. You know the gun came from police.
I don't have information about the case, but you're still going to walk her down that hallway if somebody tells you to?
The officer's face changed, barely. Maya saw it. I follow the order that's in place.
That's what everyone keeps saying. The officer looked away. Maya pointed toward the sealed door. That sentence is why she's in there. At 11:02, the judge joined by secure video. Tessa sat beside her attorney in a small legal room. No public gallery, no dramatic courtroom. Just a screen, a camera, and a clock. The state prosecutor appeared from another location. Warden Briggs stood behind Tessa. Nolan Creed was placed in a separate interview room. The judge spoke first. I have reviewed the emergency filing and the preliminary records. Tessa's attorney leaned forward.
Your Honor, we are requesting an immediate stay.
The prosecutor answered. The state opposes an indefinite stay based on unverified claims from a retired officer who concealed information for more than a decade. Tessa looked at the screen. Her attorney said the dispatch record was verified.
One record, the firearm trace was verified. Preliminary trace.
It shows the murder weapon was previously in police custody. It shows a matching control number. The attorney's voice sharpened. And an officer involved in Ms. Monroe's case admits he carried property from that evidence batch on the same night the weapon supposedly appeared in her trunk. The prosecutor looked toward his own notes. which makes Mr. Creed potentially compromised. Tessa's eyes narrowed. That was the counterattack, not against Shaw, against Nolan. The prosecutor continued, Mr. Creed's credibility is now deeply suspect. Tessa almost laughed. For 12 years, the state had relied on him. Now that his testimony threatened the conviction, he was unreliable. The judge seemed to notice the irony too. Counsel, the state called Mr. Creed at trial. That does not make every statement he gives 12 years later credible.
No, the judge looked toward Nolan's video feed. Mr.
Creed. Nolan raised his head. You understand you may expose yourself to criminal liability by answering questions today? Yes, Your Honor. You have counsel? No, I strongly recommend you obtain one. Nolan looked at the clock. No time. That is not a legal strategy. No, Nolan's voice was flat. It's just the truth. The judge paused.
Did you knowingly give false testimony at Ms.
Monroe's trial? Nolan looked at Tessa's feed. She could see him. He could see her, yes. The prosecutor sat back. The judge asked, what was false? I testified that nothing on the traffic reader changed the information available to us that night. And that was misleading. Why? Because the reader showed me
Monroe's vehicle leaving a garage at 9:18. Did you disclose that to the prosecutor?
No defense, no. Did Detective Shaw order you not to? Not in those words. Nolan repeated it. Stop helping her lawyer. The judge went quiet. Tessa watched Nolan. He looked smaller than he had in every memory she had kept of him. Not weak, just stripped of the authority she had attached to him for 12 years. The judge continued.
Did you plant the gun in Ms.
Monroe's vehicle? Nolan's face changed. No, did you see Detective Shaw do it? Do you know who did? No. The prosecutor spoke immediately. Then we still have no direct evidence identifying a different killer. Tessa's attorney shook her head. We don't need to solve the murder today. We need to establish that the conviction cannot safely support an execution. The judge looked at both sides. I understand. The clock read 11:21. 69 minutes. The judge called a 15-minute recess to review the newly submitted evidence. Tessa was escorted back to the interview room. Her attorney went with her. Neither spoke until the door shut. Then Tessa said, he's holding something back. Creed? Yes, he just admitted perjury. That's not everything. What makes you think that? Tessa looked at the camera. When the judge asked if he planted the gun, he answered immediately. So when she asked if he knew who did, he looked left first. Her attorney frowned. Tessa, that could mean anything. I know, then don't build a theory out of a glance. Tessa nodded. You're right. Her attorney looked surprised. Tessa continued. So get me the booking photos. What? The night I was arrested. Why? I want to see my car. The attorney stared at her. Tess, you have them. Somewhere. Find them. What are you looking for? Tessa looked at the clock. Something I should have noticed 12 years ago. At 11:29, Nolan Creed was returned to the conference room. The state investigator entered behind him. This time he carried a printed access report. Nolan saw it. His face changed before the investigator sat down. What is that, you know? Nolan did not answer. The investigator placed the page on the table. Archive audit. Nolan stared at the first line. The investigator pointed. The old narcotics evidence file was accessed electronically on the night of Raymond Holt's murder. Nolan said nothing. 11:43 p.m. Nolan's jaw tightened. That was after Tessa was already detained, yes. The investigator moved his finger down. User credentials. Nolan closed his eyes. Warden Briggs was standing near the door. He looked between them. Whose? The investigator did not answer Briggs. He looked at Nolan. Want to tell him? Nolan's hands curled into fists. Briggs stepped closer. Whose credentials? Nolan opened his eyes. My login. Briggs stared at him. The investigator continued. Your account accessed the evidence record containing that revolver. Nolan shook his head. I didn't access it. The system says you did. Shaw knew my password. Convenient. It was written inside my patrol notebook. You expect us to believe a homicide detective stole your login? I expect you to check the workstation. We did. Nolan stopped. The investigator leaned back. The access came from a terminal inside the temporary command post. Nolan's face went pale. He had been inside that command post. So had Shaw, so had 3 other officers, but only one account had been used. The investigator pushed the paper toward him. Your credibility problem just got worse. Nolan stared at the timestamp. 11:43, then he remembered. At 11:40, Shaw had asked him to get coffee from a cruiser outside. Nolan had been gone for maybe 5 minutes. When he returned, Shaw was standing at the computer. Nolan had never asked why. His stomach turned. I need to testify again. The investigator laughed once. You think adding another memory helps you? I don't care what helps me, you should. Nolan looked at him. Tessa Monroe has 60 minutes. At 11:37, the attorney returned with scanned photographs from the original vehicle inventory. Tessa moved toward the screen. Show me the rear. The attorney opened the first image. Grey sedan. Trunk closed.
Evidence marker beside the bumper. Another image. Driver's side.
Another rear again. Tessa leaned closer. Zoom, the attorney did.
What are you looking at? The lock? What about it? Tessa pointed. A thin scratch curved beside the trunk keyway. Her attorney frowned. That could be old. It wasn't. You remember that? Yes. You're sure? Tessa stopped herself.
No, she had promised Maya. No more certainty without facts.
I don't remember it. Her attorney waited. Tessa looked closer. But there's another photo from my insurance inspection. When? 2 months before the murder. Do you have it?
My daughter might. The attorney was already reaching for her phone.
Tessa stopped her. No. What? Maya doesn't need another thing to carry unless it matters.
Tessa, we have less than an hour, I know.
Her attorney held her gaze. Then called. Maya answered on the first ring. Is she okay? Tessa's attorney put the call on speaker. She's here.
Mom, I'm here. Maya's voice broke. Tessa swallowed.
I need something. Anything. Do you still have the insurance folder from the old house? Pause. I think so. Was it scanned? Grandma scanned everything after the trial. Can you find the inspection photos of my grey car?
Why, the trunk? Maya did not ask again. Tessa heard movement.
A zipper, papers. Then Maya's breathing. I have a cloud folder. How fast? Give me a minute. Tessa looked at the clock. 11:42, take 30 seconds. Maya almost laughed. Then she stopped, found it. The attorney received the image. Opened it, same rear angle. Tessa stared. Her attorney looked at her. That proves the lock was damaged sometime between the inspection and the arrest. Tessa shook her head. No, it helps. It helps show someone may have forced the trunk. That's enough for the judge to consider. Maybe. The attorney began uploading both images to the emergency docket. Maya was still on speaker. Mom, yes? Are they stopping it? Tessa looked at the clock. I don't know. Maya's voice went quiet. I hate that answer, so do I. At 11:46, the judge returned. 44 minutes remained. Her face gave nothing away. I have reviewed the verified dispatch entry, the firearm chain record, Mr. Creed's sworn testimony, and the newly submitted vehicle photographs. Tessa's attorney stood. The judge raised one hand. I'm not finished. Everyone stopped. The state argues that none of this establishes actual innocence. The prosecutor nodded. The judge continued. That is correct. Tessa's stomach dropped. Her attorney started to speak. The judge raised her hand again, but actual innocence is not the only issue before me. Tessa looked up. The court is now confronted with evidence that material information may have been withheld from the defense, that a key state witness provided misleading testimony, and that the murder weapon may have originated from police custody. The prosecutor leaned toward the camera. Your Honor? Counsel, he stopped. The judge looked directly into the screen. I am ordering a temporary stay of execution for 72 hours while the court conducts an evidentiary review. Tessa did not react. Not at first. Her attorney's hand covered her mouth. Behind them, Warden Briggs exhaled. Tessa looked at the clock. 11:49. 41 minutes had been left. The execution was stopped. For 72 hours. Not freedom. Not innocence. Time.
Maya heard the news 3 minutes later and cried so hard she had to sit on the floor.
Tessa did not. She had learned what temporary meant. At 12:06, Nolan was told about the stay. He closed his eyes. Good. The investigator sitting across from him did not share the relief. We're not done. Nolan opened his eyes. I know. The investigator placed another document on the table. Neither is the court. Nolan looked down. The access audit. His login, the gun record. Briggs stood behind him. We need a complete statement. I've given one. No, the investigator said. You gave us the part that made you look like a coward. Nolan stared at him. Now we need the part that may make you look like an accomplice. At 12:17, Tessa was returned to her cell. The restraints came off. Not because she was free, because the execution protocol had been suspended. She sat on the bunk. For the first time since sunrise, there was no countdown. Then Warden Briggs appeared outside the bars. Tessa. She stood. What? There's been another development. Her face tightened. Nolan. Briggs nodded. What did he do? We don't know yet. Then why are you here? Briggs looked at her. Because the state pulled the electronic access history on the gun. Tessa waited. The evidence file was opened the night of the murder. By Shaw? Briggs did not answer. That told her enough.
Who? His voice was quiet. Nolan Creed's credentials.
Tessa stared at him. The temporary relief disappeared from her face. Briggs continued. The state is now investigating whether Creed did more than stay silent. Tessa gripped the bars. For 12 years she had believed Nolan Creed was the cop who looked away. Now, less than 30 minutes after he helped stop her execution, the evidence suggested something far worse. He might have been the cop who put her there. At 12:31, 21 minutes after Tessa Monroe's execution should have begun, the state filed a motion asking the judge to keep the 72-hour stay as narrow as possible. Tessa's attorney read the filing twice. Then she looked through the glass wall of the legal room at Tessa. They're changing direction. Tessa sat down. How? They're not defending Shaw anymore. That didn't take long. They're attacking Creed. Tessa's expression didn't change. What are they saying? That every new piece of evidence depends on a man who admitted giving misleading testimony at your trial. That part is true. They're also saying his old documents may have been improperly retained. Also true, and they found another report. Tessa looked up. What report? Her attorney turned the laptop around. The document was dated 2 days after Tessa's arrest. At the bottom was Nolan Creed's signature. Tessa read the first paragraph. Then the second. The words were dry, administrative. Almost harmless, but the last sentence made her stop. Evidence recovered from the Monroe vehicle was properly secured and documented according to department procedure. Tessa looked at her attorney. He signed this. Yes. After the gun appeared. Yes, so he didn't just stay quiet.
No, Tessa looked back at the screen. He helped certify the lie.
Her attorney closed the laptop halfway. That's what the state wants the judge thinking. What do you think? I think Nolan Creed has told us the truth in pieces. Tessa leaned back. That's how he's always done it. At 12:44, Nolan sat across from the state investigator again. The supplemental report lay between them. Nolan recognized it immediately. He did not touch it. You signed this, the investigator said.
Yes. Why? Because Shaw told me the evidence had been processed correctly.
That's not what the report says, I know. It says you personally confirmed procedure. I know, did you know? The investigator leaned back. So we have false trial testimony. Nolan said nothing. Hidden parking data, nothing. A gun from an old police seizure.
Nothing. Your credentials accessing that gun's record.
Nothing, and now a signed report certifying the evidence. Nolan raised his eyes. I know what it looks like.
The investigator's voice stayed calm. No, I don't think you do.
He tapped the page. It looks like you helped frame her. Nolan stared at him. I didn't.
Then explain why every dirty piece of this case has your fingerprints somewhere near it.
Nolan looked toward the camera. For 12 years he had feared that exact sentence. That was why he had stayed quiet, not because he believed silence was right. Because once he spoke, nobody would see a frightened young patrol officer who made one bad decision after another. They would see a participant, maybe they should. I signed the report because Shaw told me I had a choice. The investigator waited. What choice? Nolan's jaw tightened. He said if I challenged the evidence handling, Internal Affairs would ask why my login had accessed the old gun record. So you knew about the access back then? No. When did you know? 2 days after the arrest. The investigator stared at him. That's different from what you told us earlier. Yes. Why did you lie? Nolan looked down because saying 3 years sounded less like I was part of it. Briggs stood near the wall. His face hardened. The investigator said, "Start over." Nolan rubbed his palms against his knees. 2 days after Tessa's arrest, Shaw showed me a The access log? Yes, my user ID was on it. What did he say? He said, "Looks like you opened the file and—" I told him I hadn't. What did he say? Nolan looked at the table. He asked who people would believe. The investigator's expression changed. Nolan continued. He knew I'd carried the evidence box. He knew I'd been inside the command post. He knew I'd testified at the preliminary hearing that I believed Tessa was the shooter. And he threatened to put the gun access on you. Nolan nodded. He didn't need to threaten me directly. What did he ask you to do? Sign the supplemental report, and you did, yes.
Why? Nolan's voice dropped. Because my wife was pregnant, I was 3 years on the job, and Shaw had 22.
The investigator said nothing. Nolan looked up. I thought if I challenged him, I'd go down with him. That doesn't make you innocent.
No, did you ever believe Tessa was innocent?
Nolan took several seconds. That's the question I used to protect myself. The investigator frowned. Nolan continued. I kept asking whether I knew she was innocent. He pointed toward the report. I didn't. Not then. But I knew the case wasn't clean. The investigator stayed silent. And I decided that wasn't enough reason to risk myself. Nolan's eyes moved toward the camera. That was the crime I kept pretending was something smaller. At 1:03, Tessa asked to see Nolan again. Warden Briggs initially refused. The state investigator objected. Tessa's attorney objected to the objection. For 11 minutes, lawyers argued about whether another recorded conversation could contaminate testimony. Then Tessa solved it, put everyone in the room. Her attorney looked at her. What, no private visit? Tessa pointed toward the camera. Record it. State investigator present. My attorney present. Warden present. Briggs frowned. You want another interview? No. Tessa looked through the glass toward the hallway.
I want him to stop choosing which part of the truth I'm allowed to hear.
At 1:19, Nolan entered. He looked worse than he had that morning. Not physically. Something in him had collapsed. Tessa sat across from him. No restraints this time. Execution protocol had been suspended. That small difference did not escape either of them. Nolan sat. Tessa placed a copy of his supplemental report on the table. You signed this, yes. You told investigators Shaw pressured you.
Yes, you knew your login had been used 2 days after my arrest.
Yes, but earlier today you said you discovered that years later.
Yes. Why should I believe anything you say now? Nolan looked at her. You shouldn't. Tessa's attorney glanced at him.
Tessa did not.
Leaned back.
Then why am I here?
Because lying men still know facts. Nolan absorbed that. Tessa pointed at the report. Did you put the gun in my trunk? No, did Shaw. I didn't see him do it. That's not what I asked. Nolan looked at the investigator, then back to Tessa. I believe he did. Why? Because of the timing. Explain it. Nolan glanced toward the clock. There was no execution countdown now. For the first time, he did not have to rush. That made what he said next harder. Shaw sent me 2 blocks south at 9:51 for the witness who didn't exist. Yes. How long? 11 minutes. And when you came back? Your trunk was open. Tessa's jaw tightened. Yes, who was near it? Nolan stared at her. Shaw. Nobody moved. Tessa's attorney spoke. You didn't tell investigators that? I told them the trunk was open. That is not the same thing. I know. Tessa's voice became cold. Why didn't you say his name? Nolan looked down. Because I still don't know if I saw him at the trunk or walking away from it. Tessa leaned forward. Look at me. He did. After 12 years, don't protect yourself with grammar. Nolan flinched. Tessa continued. Where was Shaw? Behind your car. I don't know. Was anyone else there? Not that I remember. Did you ask why the trunk was open? No. Why? Because I already believed you were guilty. There it was. Not conspiracy. Not hatred. Something more ordinary. He had already decided. Tessa sat back. Nolan looked at the tabletop. I saw facts through the conclusion I had already chosen. Tessa's expression stayed hard. That sentence doesn't give me 12 years back.
I know, no you don't. He nodded once, you're right.
Tessa looked toward her attorney, then back to Nolan. There's one thing I still don't understand. What? The computer login. Nolan's face changed. Tessa saw it. So there is more, he exhaled.
At 11:43, my account opened the old gun file.
We know, I wasn't in the command post at 11:43.
The investigator leaned forward. Nolan looked at him. You can verify it. How my radio? The investigator's eyes narrowed. Nolan continued. At 11:52, dispatch sent me to a disturbance at 9th and Clark. Tessa's attorney turned toward the investigator. Do those radio archives still exist? Nolan shook his head. They do. How do you know? Because the department preserved all critical incident radio traffic with the homicide file. The investigator stood.
You're saying the same system that puts your login on the gun record may also prove you weren't at the terminal?
Tessa stared at Nolan, and Shaw knew your password.
Yes, how? Nolan's mouth tightened. It was written inside my patrol notebook. Where was your notebook? In the command post. Who was there? Nolan looked directly at her, Shaw. The room changed. Not because Nolan had suddenly become innocent. He had not. He had signed a false report. He had withheld evidence. He had misled a jury. But the thing that looked most incriminating, the digital record tying Nolan to the old gun file, might not prove he helped Shaw. It might prove Shaw had prepared a second person to blame. Tessa looked at the investigator. Find the radio. He was already at the door. At 1:46, the state located the archive dispatch recording. At 11:42 p.m. on the night Raymond Holt died, Nolan Creed's unit answered a call at 9th and Clark.
At 11:44, his voice came over the radio. Clear. Distant.
2 blocks away from the command post, the gun file had been accessed at 11:43. Nolan could not have used the terminal. That did not prove Shaw had. But the command post roster showed only 3 people logged inside during that minute. 1 civilian technician, 1 evidence officer who had signed out at 11:39, and Detective Brent Shaw. By 2:20, the state's argument had changed again. Now prosecutors were no longer saying Nolan's login proved Nolan participated in planting the gun. They were saying nobody could know who used his credentials. Tessa's attorney heard the new position and looked at her. They're retreating. Tessa shook her head. They're surviving. What's the difference? Retreat means they know where this ends. Tessa looked toward the legal room door. Survival means they still think they can make us prove more than they ever had to. That prediction was correct. At 3:05, the judge reconvened. The state did not ask to lift the stay. Instead, it argued that Tessa's conviction should remain intact while a full investigation continued. The prosecutor spoke carefully. Your Honor, serious misconduct may have occurred. Tessa looked at the screen. May have. Her attorney touched her arm. The prosecutor continued. But misconduct does not automatically establish that Ms. Monroe did not kill Raymond Holt. Tessa's attorney stood.
No, it establishes something more immediate.
The judge looked at her. What? The state cannot identify one untainted pillar left supporting this conviction. She began counting them. The timeline relied on missing parking data. The murder weapon came from police custody. The officer who handled early scene information gave misleading testimony. The lead detective's vehicle was reported leaving the scene. The lead detective possessed Ms. Monroe's parking fob. And police computer records appear to have been accessed under another officer's credentials, while that officer was documented elsewhere. The prosecutor answered, none identifies Shaw as Holt's killer.
We are not asking this court to convict Shaw.
Her attorney looked toward Tessa.
We are asking why Tessa Monroe should remain convicted by evidence the state itself can no longer explain.
The judge called another recess. Tessa expected an answer within an hour. She did not get one. That was the temporary failure. At 5:40 that evening, the judge extended the stay but refused to vacate the conviction. A full evidentiary hearing would begin the next morning. Tessa would remain in custody. Maya received the news in the same waiting room where she had expected to learn whether her mother was alive. When she was finally allowed back inside, she found Tessa sitting at the visitation table. No chains around her ankles, but still prison clothes. Maya sat across from her, so we won. Tessa looked at her. No, we stopped the execution. Yes, that's a win. It's time. Maya's mouth tightened. You always do that. Do what? Make good things smaller before they can disappoint you. Tessa looked away. Maya leaned forward. I was 12 when you got arrested. I know, no, listen. Tessa looked back. I learned not to get excited when lawyers called. Maya's voice shook. I learned not to believe appeals. She wiped at one eye. I learned that every time somebody said new evidence, I should wait for the sentence after it. Tessa said nothing. I got that from you. Tessa's face changed. Maya continued, and I understand why. She reached across the table. But today you were supposed to die. Tessa stared at her daughter's hand. You didn't. Maya's fingers closed around hers, so I'm taking the win. Tessa's eyes filled. Maya gave a tired smile. You can borrow it until tomorrow. Tessa laughed, softly. Then she squeezed Maya's hand. All right what? I'll borrow it. That was the first thing prison had given back to them. Not freedom, not 12 years, permission to believe in one day before demanding proof of the next. The evidentiary hearing lasted 2 days. Nolan testified first. This time, he did not protect himself. He admitted withholding the parking reader information. He admitted signing the false supplemental report. He admitted discovering Tessa's parking fob in Shaw's desk and keeping it rather than reporting it. He admitted that fear for his career mattered more to him than doubt about a death penalty conviction. The state's attorney asked him the question everyone expected.
You want this court to believe Detective Shaw manipulated you for years?
Nolan shook his head. No. The attorney pauses. I'm asking the court to believe I let him. The answer stayed in the room. Nolan continued. He couldn't make me sign that report. He couldn't make me stay silent. He gave me reasons. I made the choices. Tessa watched from the defense table. That was the first time she believed he had stopped negotiating with the truth. The state investigator then presented the dispatch archive. Shaw's county vehicle had been logged near the service road. Nolan's radio transmission proved he was away from the command post when his credentials accessed the old weapon record. The firearm's original evidence number was verified. It had been marked for destruction 3 years before Holt's murder. No destruction certificate existed. The key fob recovered from Shaw's desk matched the account number on Tessa's archived parking receipt. Then came the detail nobody expected to matter, the trunk photographs. The image from Tessa's insurance inspection showed damage around the lock. The police inventory image taken hours after arrest showed fresh scoring beside the keyway. A forensic examiner could not say who had forced the lock, but he could say the damage was consistent with recent tool entry. The state stopped arguing that the trunk had clearly remained secure until the warrant. By the second afternoon, the case no longer resembled the one presented to Tessa's jury. The judge returned shortly after 4. Tessa stood. Maya watched from the back. Nolan sat on the opposite side of the room under subpoena. The judge looked down at the papers in front of her. This court is not determining today who killed Raymond Holt. Tessa's fingers tightened around the table. The court is determining whether the conviction of Tessa Monroe can remain valid. The judge paused. It cannot. Maya covered her mouth. Tessa did not move. The state's case depended on a timeline now shown to have omitted material data. Physical evidence central to the conviction came from police custody under circumstances state cannot reliably reconstruct. A material police witness gave misleading testimony, and substantial evidence concerning Detective Brent Shaw was never disclosed to the defense. The judge looked directly at Tessa. The conviction is vacated. Tessa closed her eyes. The judge continued. The death sentence is vacated. Her attorney grabbed Tessa's arm. The matter is remanded to the state for determination whether any lawful retrial can proceed. It was not yet release, not technically. The prosecutor requested 24 hours. The judge gave him 6. At 9:18 that evening, the state announced it would not seek immediate retrial. Without the gun, without the original timeline, without Shaw's testimony, and with the newly discovered evidence placing Shaw's vehicle near the scene, prosecutors conceded they could not ethically proceed on the existing record. Tessa Monroe walked out of East Ridge Correctional at 10:07 p. Myers was waiting. No cameras were allowed past the outer gate, but dozens waited beyond the road. Tessa ignored them. She walked toward her daughter. This time, there were no ankle chains stopping her after one step. Maya met her halfway. Neither spoke. They held each other until a corrections officer quietly turned away. Nolan Creed did not come to the prison. Tessa saw him 3 weeks later. He had been charged with perjury and official misconduct related to his trial testimony and the supplemental report. His attorney had advised him not to speak with her. He requested the meeting anyway. Tessa agreed on one condition.
No apologies prepared by lawyers. They met in a government interview room.
Nolan sat across from her. For a moment, it looked like the prison again. Same table, same distance, different people. Nolan spoke first. I'm not asking you to forgive me, good. He nodded. I thought if I told the truth, I'd lose everything. Tessa looked at him, and I lost most of it anyway. That isn't justice. No, he looked down. It's consequence. Tessa studied him. What do you think justice is? Nolan considered the question. I don't think I get to define it. Tessa leaned back. That's the smartest thing you've said to me. A small smile passed across his face and disappeared. Nolan looked toward the door. Why did you ask for me? Tessa had expected the question because of your deposition. That's all no. She looked at him. I remembered your face when Shaw took that traffic reader. Nolan went still. You looked scared. I was for years. I thought you were scared I'd figured something out. Nolan waited. Then I read that deposition. Tessa's voice softened. And I wondered if you were scared because you had. Nolan looked down. Tessa stood. That was the difference. He raised his eyes. You still could have been wrong. I was wrong about part of it. Which part? I thought you were the man who buried the whole truth. She walked toward the door. Nolan waited. Tessa turned back. You were the man who buried enough of it to let someone else finish the job. He absorbed that without arguing. Tessa opened the door. Nolan, he looked at her. You saved my life that morning. His face tightened. Tessa continued. That doesn't erase what you did before it.
I know. Good. She left. The investigation into Brent Shaw's cases expanded over the next several months.
Investigators found irregular evidence transfers in other files. 2 convictions were reopened. Several old disciplinary complaints were reviewed. No court ever issued a final ruling declaring Shaw the killer of Raymond Holt. He was dead. Some questions died with him, but the state formally dismissed the murder charge against Tessa after concluding that the evidence was too corrupted to support another prosecution. Nolan pleaded guilty to 1 count tied to his false official report and accepted responsibility for his testimony. He lost benefits he had expected to keep in retirement. More important to Tessa, he testified in the reopened cases. Not as a hero, as a witness to how silence worked. Maya once asked her mother whether she hated him. They were sitting at a small kitchen table 6 months after Tessa's release. Tessa had been trying to learn online banking. Maya had been trying not to laugh at her. Then the question came, do you hate Creed? Tessa looked at the laptop. No, you forgive him, no. Maya frowned. How does that work? Tessa thought about it. I don't need to carry him. Maya smiled. That sounds like something they put on a coffee mug. Tessa laughed. Then don't buy me the mug. Maya reached over and fixed the password field her mother had accidentally cleared. Tessa watched her. 12 years ago, she had believed the worst thing prison could take was freedom. She had been wrong. It took ordinary things, arguments over passwords. Bad coffee. Hearing her daughter laugh from another room. Getting annoyed when someone left dishes in the sink. Choosing what time to go to bed. Nobody returned those years. No judge could. No investigation could. That was why Tessa never called what happened a miracle. A miracle erased cost. This did not. One reporter eventually asked her why, on the morning she was supposed to die, she had used her final request on Nolan Creed. Tessa thought about the traffic reader, the false report, the parking fob hidden in a dead detective's desk, the gun that should have been destroyed, and the retired cop who had spent 12 years hoping silence would keep his life intact. Then she answered, because the truth usually isn't hiding with the bravest person. The reporter waited. Tessa looked toward Maya, standing a few feet away. Sometimes it's hiding with the person most afraid to admit he saw it. That morning, Nolan Creed had walked into East Ridge, believing Tessa wanted to accuse him. She had, but accusation was never the thing that stopped the execution. What stopped it was forcing one man to choose, one final time, whether protecting himself mattered more than telling the truth. 12 years earlier, he had chosen himself. With 3 hours left, he finally chose differently. It did not make him innocent. It made Tessa alive.